Evening and welcome to another edition of the Magpie Circle with myself and Mark Stallard this evening. The late show at Meadow Lane on Saturday, but a 95th minute penalty nicks us a point. A not exactly inspired performance, but we do at least stay unbeaten. We are fourth still in the table. Your thoughts and views on that against Harrogate? Suspect there will be a bit of a clamour or certainly a ground swell for Mr. Jarvis to see a bit more game time after winning that penalty in stoppage time. Your thoughts and views overall on that performance? It's Colchester at home this coming Saturday. Before we all get carried away about another home game and all the rest of it, Colchester did do the business on the league leaders on Saturday, so not one to be sniffed at. I think that could be another tricky one for us at home this coming Saturday. Also on the show tonight, who watched the Sky documentary on the Munto takeover of Notts County last night? 2-hour show. I think quite a few of you have said you've seen it. Thoughts and views on that, stepping back in time to this era? It seems a long time ago now. A lot of talk about, if we've got time tonight, finances, balancing the budget, wage structures in League 1 and 2. AFC Wimbledon, remember them, went up through the playoffs, run by a trust, have made a statement over the past couple of days to say that they cannot continue to operate as a trust, losing too much money. They need external investment. Some of the figures that they have shared are actually very interesting. They said they had the 14th highest budget last year and got promoted. I mean, despite a playoff, getting promoted, they lost £1.6 million. This year, their budget is the bottom bar one, 23rd out of 24. And all this comes at a time when Peterborough, Darragh McAntony, among others, has been leading a campaign of League One clubs, and he's got over 2/3 majority to bring in a salary cap of £4.7 million for League One clubs. There are a couple of problems with that, despite widespread support among his fellow chairmen. Rick Parry and the league are not keen, and one of the principal reasons they're not keen is that this is highly likely to trigger a response from the PFA, the playing union of footballers, and it's very difficult to see how you can bring a salary cap into UK sport with government, with current legislation. And as I say, the understanding is the PFA would be looking to block that. Your thoughts? Notts County under Alex and Christoph Reitz, I don't think they've ever been more stable as a football club for over 20 years since Derek Pavis left. However, depends on your definition of sustainability. When you think the brothers, it's already cost them the best part of £20 million, and they only bought the club 7 years ago. Not, broadly speaking, running at a £2 million a year loss, despite best endeavours to maximise off-field revenues. And finally, you would have seen the signage. The Hayden Green family stand is back. No commercial sponsorship of it. Club haven't yet made a formal announcement, but it is going to be returning to Hayden Green family stand as per the changed signage on Saturday. So all that and more to discuss on the show tonight. Thanks as always to our official partners, JH Accountants and the Big Shed at the Trent Navigation. We'll dive onto the message boards imminently. The professionals view, as we entitled this show. Stell, I guess a lot of us thought we only had to turn up on Saturday, given current form of both teams. How surprised were you in the end by what happened?
Not surprised, because it's happened many times, hasn't it, throughout football. You're right. We sort of think sometimes we get a bit blasé, don't we? We think we just have to turn up and get a result, and that's not the case. In professional sport, there's always an opponent, no matter what the situation, no matter what the circumstances, that are going to make it difficult for you. And that's exactly what Harrogate did. I think The fact that they were down to the bare bones, as we know, only named 3 substitutes on the bench.
Just tidy that one up, stuff, because I didn't know. We all thought it was gamesmanship by Simon Weaver, but it wasn't. Obviously, Paul Bollum was there, one of your old teammates. He covers Harrogate. Just explain, because obviously I wasn't able to listen to you on Saturday, why there were only 3 subs.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the reason they couldn't just name a load of youngsters on the bench just to fill up the places was because they've not got the correct category academy status, if you like. They've got a junior pathway, I think is the terminology for their youngsters. So because of that, you need the the academy category, status to be able to name these, say, under 18s effectively on the bench to fill the bench up. Because they hadn't got that, they were unable to do so. So that is the reason I believe that they could only name 3 players on the bench, one of which was recalled from Ossett, wasn't he, the day before, or recalled from loan. So, yeah, that was the reason. That no gamesmanship, nothing untoward. It was just that they are the circumstances, and Simon Weaver was dealing with an absolute bare cupboard, wasn't he? But credit to them. Sometimes we say in adversity, it can galvanise a team and it can galvanise players. And, let make no mistake, that the 11 that started were all experienced players. They weren't, make weights or whatever. They were decent players, and so it proved. They backs to the wall sort of performance, was it? They played quite well in the first half. I think Notts were lackluster, easy for me to say, in the first half. Went behind, and by going behind, that gives Harrogate something to defend, doesn't it? Something to protect, something to look after, gives them belief and hope. And like I say, it took till the 90 whatever second, third minute or whatever it was to actually get the equaliser. But yeah, you've got to give them credit, but this is what can happen. It's another reminder to us that you can't just turn up. You can't take it for granted. You have to perform week in, week out. It's another reminder of League Two football as well. That players aren't robots. It doesn't just happen. They don't just flick a switch and perform like they did last Monday at Cheltenham. The same 11 players started, and it was sort of almost a polar opposite sort of performance, wasn't it? No sign of the same sort of tempo, intensity, pressing, work rate in that first half that we showed in the first half at Cheltenham. So that is what can happen in football, and it happened Saturday. But the upside is we got a point out of it, which, you don't know what that might mean come the end of the season. Not what we wanted, of course it isn't. But better get a point than nothing, which it was looking like towards the end. And yeah, so you can't be too sniffy. We can't be too blasé that go, well, we should have beat them. Yeah. If we'd have played better, you'd have fancied us to take all 3 points, but we didn't. And then it's about making sure you get something out of the game, and they did. So, a little bit of credit for that. Certainly, in the circumstances, it could have been nothing. So we got a point, and we move on.
Okay, let's get to opening comments from Stell there. Let's get some thoughts from the flock. Paul Mantle on first, feeling a bit better after the disappointment of Saturday today. We need to remember it's a long old season, and some teams will are going to make it, will want it as much as us and frustrate us. Evening from Nigel Bosworth. Let's hope we get back to winning ways on Saturday. Black Sox, hi all, not able to watch live today, but we'll catch up later. I was wondering, with Jake Bugg being a Notts fan, could we play Lightning Bolt pre-kickoff? Current music not inspiring. If one of the things that inspires vehement debate, I've come to the conclusion over many years, Black Sox, is the choice of music over the tannoy. You will not believe how passionate people get about, we must have that, you can't have that, it's the worst ever. So, I'd love to see the old 1970s when we're in the top division. County's the team for me, so, but I know that will set alarm bells ringing for many of us. It's all subjective, isn't it, in opinions. Robert Minister from America to Australia. Morning from Australia. Harrogate, a bridge too far. Thankfully, we dug out a point. We do need to run with the ball more, as Martin said in the pre-match. I think he was talking about kind of creating more one-on-ones and committing the opposition. Evening from Richard Elvian, who goes on to say, I expect Colchester to apply similar tactics next week as Harrogate did on Saturday. How do we combat this effectively? Richard Elvian, I heard Stell comment post-match about how during the second half the crowd became more involved. I think that's down to the drummer in the Kop, who was absent until about the 55th minute, makes a massive difference. Just like pre-match music, drums in crowd is normally a pretty divisive issue. I do think it helped, Richard, that we were attacking the Kop end, and as the game goes on, they're kind of trying to suck that ball into the net. And I've seen one or two comments which I would agree with. I know the ref gave the penalty. I wonder if that had been at the other end, we might not have got that. And I do think collectively, the Kop, as Liverpool did it for many years, I think that could have been the 0.1% that just made that little bit of difference. Jonathan Hammocks, it's an 8-part message tonight, so bear with me. Only joking, says Jonathan. Happy pills are kicking in. Frustrating on Saturday, but at least we got the point. Part 2. There's only 2. No, there's not. There's 3. What a brilliant crowd at the weekend. And I think the Kop played their part in the penalty decision. Indeed. Credit to Dennis for being cool. Jarvis looked good as well. And Jonathan, part 3, looking at the bigger picture. After all the worry and doubt in August and September, I would have snapped your hand off for where we are now. Full credit to Martin and the lads. Evening from Nick N. I think Jarvis, he says, looked good on Saturday. He's good at keeping the ball close to his feet, but I do feel we need another striker in January, plus a defender and a quality midfielder. Evening from Luke's dad. Nick goes on, first goal for Harrogate looked like a mix-up between defender and ruse to me. Greza Maxwell installing floors somewhere in the northeast. You'll never guess who I saw today at Scotch Corner Services. Put us out of our misery, Greza. You may have done. I'm still on 6:48 with these messages. Top priority on Saturday, says Tim Watchorn, is an early goal. More pace going forward. Evening from Stephen Newton and from David Dawes, who said, it's nice to see us move the ball faster and also not rush free kicks, which seem to go backwards, turning attack into defending. I'm guessing David is focusing more on the second half than the first half. Royston says, Jarvis has to start for me on Saturday. Greetings from sunny Woodborough, says Richard Terry. Bloody hell, if it was sunny at 5:56, you must have a different climate, you know, unlike Woodborough Times GMT or something. Another calamitous goal, exciting second half though. Ian Haywood, deflated from Saturday, getting a bit better now. Hopefully it was a mere lull and we can pick the form back up for Saturday. Hello from Karen Knight. Adam Kent, my thoughts on Saturday. Jarvis is a good winger, not such a good wing back. Probably why we haven't seen much of him. Evening from John Parnham. My usual FaceTime meeting has failed, so I'm here at the beginning. Greetings to you all. I look forward to coming to Meadow Lane on Saturday and hope for an inspiring performance. John Parnham is one of the Magpie Circle's thespians, I think it's fair to say. Does his amateur dramatics. Evening from Richard Hawksworth. Important to snatch a point to keep the unbeaten run going. Norfolk Pie. All Knots really need is belief. Belief as individuals and belief in each other as a team, and the ability to take opportunities when they present themselves. Martin Shipley, evening all. Draw away, win at home, gain 4 points. We've gained the points over those last 2 games. We just did it in reverse. Stuart Woodhead, evening. Adam Kent. Penalty was probably due to cumulative appeals. Thank you, the cop. Last season, we would have lost Saturday. MP has installed a fighting spirit. No pre-assists to record, unfortunately. I've no idea, Flock. I'm very anti-stats. Does Jarvis get an assist? I know we've scored from a penalty, but does he get an assist? Does he get an assist, Stow? What do you reckon? Or does he get a pre-assist? I don't know.
Not in my book, but he does get credit. He does get credit for winning the penalty, as do the people that mentioned about the crowd. I thought they really did play their part. And when people ever ask players or ex-players like me, do the crowd make a difference? What does it mean? I think Saturday's a perfect example. I think what people have said is absolutely right. I thought for me, when the referee made a couple of contentious decisions and didn't give the handball penalty from the corner,
yeah, basketball at times, weren't there?
10 minutes or so into the second half, then I thought that brought the crowd into the game, more so than anything not so done in terms of performance-wise. But sometimes it needs that. And like I say, I don't think, other than that first one, the sort of handball potential, which I'd love to see again, we didn't see it again. I don't think any of the other penalty shots were particularly convincing for me. But the cumulative effort, like I say, of all them appeals, if we're honest, I think the referee felt the pressure of it and caved a little bit, because it was certainly not a stonewall penalty.
No.
What Will Jarvis got, it wasn't it could have been. You could have argued it started outside the box. It maybe carried on in. It was debatable, certainly. But I think, yeah, the noise and the pressure that was put on officials, and I say, I've been a player, and now obviously I watch games, and I've always watched games all my life. And I know it shouldn't happen, but you are not telling me that officials don't feel the influence and the pressure of situations and circumstances. If there was no crowd atmosphere and no pressure on him, I don't think he gives it. And you're possibly right if it's down the other end where it's a bit quieter in front of the away fans, a little bit more. Maybe he doesn't give it, but the fact that the crowd were making a noise, the fact that he was under pressure, the fact that Will Jarvis got past his man and sort of forced the situation, asked the question, all them take credit for it. But yeah, that was a massive part. I think the fans played a massive part Saturday in what was a performance that was, below where they've set the standards at.
I'm going to go on a tangent. I've left my mobile phone on, and I do get various messages. This is absolutely true. This is absolutely true. If you look very closely, you'll see the name on there. So this is from Stuart Robertson, aka Scotty's dad. And I think I'd said to you, obviously, we're all delighted Scotty got the new 3.5-year contract. I didn't know this. I've no idea where I should be reading this out, but he told me anyway. And clearly, now Scotty's got a 3.5-year contract, he can afford to pay any fine. So, Paul, your podcast, a great regular watch for me. I heard you mention me sending you the odd message last week. I did. Thought I'd share this snippet. And this literally has come in about 2 minutes ago on LinkedIn. Apparently, the players at Notts have got a fine list. It's £20 if Notts find a relative, so I presume this is Martin Patterson, if they find a relative commenting on social media. So I've been warned by Scott after he got a fine earlier this season because of me. So I cannot comment on social media. I wonder whether a podcast counts on social media. So my lips are sealed, but needless to say, we are all delighted with his new contract. I remember the list of fines is hilarious, isn't it? And like down the years, I remember when I first went to Leicester, Brian Little had a big thing about players not walking barefoot because tools of the trade tread on a bloody drawing pin or something. So if you went in the showers or wandered around the dressing rooms with in your socks or bare feet, it was a tenner fine. All them little fines. And that's a new one on me, that one, to be honest with you. So if a relative does a comment on social media and they find out, you get done 20 quid. Did you get many fines, Stel? Did you get many fines?
Well, we had the fine list. Yeah, we always had the fine list, and you had to wear flip-flops or trainers, you had to have footwear, all that sort of thing. Obviously, relatives commenting on social media wouldn't have been a thing back when I played. So social media didn't really exist. So that's obviously modern day finest. I'd be interested to know what else there is, but Yeah, I say but it's good. Like I say, it just helps set standards, things like that. Your fines, again, it generally goes into a pool. Some goes to charity, and some goes towards the Christmas do it used to do. So, but yeah, as far as I believe, I mean, all the spoil sports, wherever it is, HR department, so that will sort of say, well, it's not allowable. You can't stop relatives from doing what they want on social media. But like I say, as long as it's all agreed and accepted in house, then that's the main bit.
Yeah, and of course, Scotty's dad, he's had to, work really hard to get the level of fitness required to play regular games. We spoke about this earlier in the season, and he's got his reward with that contract that was announced on Friday.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think he deserves, the reward of the contract. His performance level's been really good since he's got back in, and he's a good age as well to get tied down, as an asset. Obviously, the only question mark I think you'd put against Scott is how many games you're going to get out of him. Can he stay fit for lengthy periods of times, as Matt Palmer does? Always seems to be available. So that's the hopefully he's getting more confidence in his own body.
Yeah.
Now he's getting a run of games together. He certainly looks strong in his performance. Say talent isn't in question and ability isn't in question. Hopefully he's a Notts County player for years to come and a valuable asset he will be. But yeah, and I think also, the club deserve plaudits for getting a player like him tied down, say really good age, showing their faith in him, showing the ability back in him, and protecting an asset, as we said, that could be a positive for Notts for years to come.
Okay, Flock, if Scotty gets done, 20 quid, we'll have to have a whip round. Colin Metcalf, evening everyone. We have several players who most teams at this level would love to have. Add some quality in January, and we are in business. The hard part is staying in touch through a tough December. Norfolk Pie, too many times over the past 2 seasons, we've got ourselves into a good position in the league and blown it. So 2 opposing views there. Stuart Woodward, we always try and be objective on this show. For me, was certainly a penalty. Not one Harrogate player, including the player making the foul, appealed. AD Clark, evening AD, take a positive point. It was definitely deserved with the second half performance. I know Harrogate came with a game plan, but I wouldn't want to watch them just defending every week. I suspect there might be more the same with Colchester on Saturday, AD. Although, of course, they kept a clean sheet and beat the league leaders 2-0 on the road. So ends justify the means, I guess. Essie Kent. My highlight of Saturday had to be introducing myself to Stell as Essie from the Magpie Circle, married to pre-assist Adam.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes. I met her and her son. Her son's coming up 2021 soon. I can't remember when they said, but yeah, good to meet them near the gates at the end after the game.
It's amazing who you bump into. I bumped into Billy Ivory, the playwright, filmmaker. I saw him briefly as I was limping along down the back of the stand. John Parnham, I thought that Bennett's deserved a lot of credit for his endeavour and his pace on Saturday. Evening from Mark Williams. Great point in the end. Keeps momentum going. Looking forward to my first game of the season Saturday. As I live, I can't quite read that bit of a breakdown on the keyboard there. 2 form teams in League 2 currently. AD Clark, credit to Matty Palmer this season, as he has had many critics about him being captain. It showed that we missed him in the FA Cup, and when he came on against Harrogate, he made the team tick. Evening from Lippy Jane. Greza Maxwell, there's a clue to who he met at the A1. Born in Notts to an English mum, Italian dad, played and raised in York, played for York, Sunderland, Palace, Derby, Birmingham, Oxford, Panionios, think that's Greece, isn't it? And Darlington. There you go. I'm sure you're all having a go to choose that. Mark Gabbiadini seems to be the favourite at the minute. Lippy Jane, Palmer and Jarvis made a huge difference second half. Also, the Dennis and Jatta combo. It is indeed Mr. Gabbiadini. John Collins. Probably not the former Nottingham City Council leader, who is a Watford fan. Still persevering with Palmer taking corners. Hall was not an improvement. On the other hand, Bennett's put some excellent corners in and should be a first choice. Fingers crossed, says Essie, that we can start Palmer, and his rapport with Robbo is superb. Norfolk Pie, Mr. Jarvis is too willing to go to ground for my liking, and I suspect for Martin's liking too. Well, I'm sure it was to all our liking when he got the penalty. AD Clark, Jatta giving up the penalty to Dennis. That would never have happened if Stell was playing. Were you surprised with the penalty change, or had you half expected that, Stell? Clearly, I'm thinking this is because Jatta missed the penalty in the shootout against Brackley.
Yeah, absolutely. I was a little bit surprised it was Matty Dennis, but like I say, the only other one that's been successful is Jody Jones, hasn't he? He took them in open play, so there's no real precedence for Jatta taking them this season. So yeah, obviously it's whoever feels confident. I'm glad it was one of the strikers. Always like to see a striker taking penalties. Whoever says you're right, it's a free chance to score a goal. Strikers should always be the first one. I think try and get the ball, but yeah, took it calmly, composed, and hopefully that'll just do him a bit of good. You know, having to bide his time, not getting too much game time, Matt Dennis. So getting a goal will just give him a bit of a fillip, and say it just adds to that competition for places, which I think is running well, and it's serving us well at the minute, aren't we? Top of the form table, as somebody mentioned. Colchester currently, I think, third over the last 6 games. So say two teams in form on Saturday. It'll be a good game.
Lippy Jane, I didn't notice the Hayden Green stand had returned. Yeah, the club have changed around a lot of the signage, and they have put back the original Hayden Green stand signage now. Richard Hawksworth, notice you made an appearance last night on the Sky documentary, Paul. Only just recognise you as you had hair. Look, there's a little bit there. There you go. Look. Are you all dazzled now?
Yeah, I was going to say, you're blinding me.
There was a lot more 13 years ago. I'll give you that. Hey, bloody hell. Hey, spending 10 minutes. It all dropped out after spending 10 minutes with Peter Trembling and Sven, to be honest with you, at that time. Greza Maxwell, I watched the podcast with Darren McAntony regarding that issue with salary caps. He said he had a majority of the chairman on board. I believe it's 18 of the 24, but they've kind of got a decision to make as to whether they would go against the executive of the Football League. And of course, this big challenge, and we'll speak to Stal a little bit later on in the programme, is whether it's actually legal. Yeah, which I suspect it isn't, and I'm pretty certain there would be a challenge from the PFA. Derek Flowers, has Cotter been sent back to Barnsley? Lots of rumours about. Now, I'm not aware of that at the moment, but certainly he's having limited game time. Richard Elvian, Harrogate nullified us with low block and man-to-man. Michael Fido, not surprised the lad from Ilkeston scored after watching him in midweek. Shout out to Will Jarvis, says Joe Crabtree, who looked a great outlet on the left, finding space in good positions. Norfolk Pie, successful teams don't take their foot off the gas. Linda Lou, hi from Fuerteventura. Be back for the Colchester game, she says. The cop got a pre-assist, says Adam Kent, king of the pre-assists, regards the penalty decision. Blimey, the flock are everywhere at the minute. Andy Adcock, who is in Cyprus. Don't think I've ever seen us appeal for so many penalties. We got there in the end. We got there in the end, Andy. John Parr thought not very slow in the first half, but the second half was much better, more direct football and more pace. Steve Silver, Shuey, evening. Pleased we got the point on Saturday. We deserved something. Harrogate made it tough, man-to-man marking. Still think we need a new keeper, but not Belshaw for me. Harvey E, come on, Stell. We must be able to think of some ACDC inspired tunes for the PA. How about Back in Black, brackets and white?
Yeah.
Derek Flowers has had an email. TV license is due £174.50. I need a drink, says Derek. Richard Terry talking about, I said to you, pre-match music is just such a hot topic, very volatile. Talking about pre-kickoff music, my suggestion is the original Robin Hood theme. Better than them over the rivers, Mull of Kintyre. Robin Hood, riding through the glen. Is that the one that they had? Was it Errol Flynn, one of the first Robin Hood movies? John Parr reckons it's no assist. Not quite sure why for the penalty for Jarvis. But Andrew Gregory says Jarvis will get the assist on fantasy football, which is usually where he plays. Richard Elvian, wasn't it all done with smoke signals when Stell played in Cooksey? Remember, well, no, he was talking about Cameron and Connell Rawlins. That was 2 or 3 years ago. I don't think that was the fine. Oh, Jonathan's come back in with part 4. Jonathan Hammocks. When you look at the crowd on Saturday, there were over 9,800 Notts fans. What a huge potential we've got. I hope in 5 years' time we are established in League One or the Championship. Hey, League One, absolute base level, Jonathan. Absolute base level. Stell, let's get. We've had quite a few people talking about it. Look, it was a small cameo. I think there is a groundswell among fans. They would like to see more of him. Has Mr. Jarvis strengthened his cause to be involved a bit more, or not for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he came on and affected the game, didn't he? Won us the penalty. And again, it is that ability to go past players. You know, just drift by. Okay, I know Mikulski's a centre forward by trade, and he came on and fouled everybody bar the referee, I think, in his little cameo since he came on. But you've still got to have that. You've got to have that ability to go past players. And you know, even if and again, I'm only surmising and guessing what might have happened in so far this season, is that Will Jarvis perhaps isn't the type of player that Martin Patterson would initially go for. Now, whether he sees him as a luxury type of player, whether he sees him as maybe a little bit lazy, maybe thinks you can't trust him, I don't know. Maybe he didn't think he was doing enough hard work on the training ground. Whatever has happened previously, there's probably been some sort of clearing of the air, or some sort of reaching an agreement, maybe an improvement from Will Jarvis, maybe a thawing of things, but who knows? I don't know. Maybe since Richard Montague's come back, maybe they've sat down, because don't forget, Will Jarvis was a Richard Montague sort of player,
Yeah.
wasn't he? Really,
Yes.
when he was here before, and he was given a decent term contract. But whatever it is, there seems to be a sort of mending of the ways, whereby he wasn't even in the 18, was he, for
No, exactly.
sort of 80-90% of this season, Will Jarvis. And I think it was only the cup game when he got his first real involvement. And since then, like I say, and then Saturday he gets in when there's 7 on the bench, and he gets on. And when we're chasing the game and he does something like that, wins us the penalty, that can only be positive for him. That can only be a tick in the plus column for him in the eyes of the manager. Now he's got to keep doing it. Obviously, that is it's a small sample size, but that is what football is. Sometimes it frustrates you. What everybody wants to play every minute of every game, and sometimes the manager will see something different, and he'll like other players, and he'll like things that other players do differently to you. And that is, you can go one of two ways, and you can sort of think, woe is me, it's not fair, and sort of, not saying down tools, but you can sort of just sit and sulk, if you like, and accept it. Or what seems to be the case is that you go, okay, I'll do what I can in training. Every time I get a chance, I'll try and give him a nudge, and I'll go and speak to him and see what he wants and see how I can improve and see how I can put myself in the window, in his window to get in the team, and just see how the situation is. And there seems to be, like I say, a bit of a thaw in between the two. I don't know if there was any fallout or just whether it is just, like I say, football is all about opinions. But Will Jarvis will have done himself no harm on Saturday. Obviously, his teammates will be thankful of him, and we know he's got that ability. We've seen him sort of at the back end of last season as well. He's got that ability just to beat players, and that is not common. Not everybody is blessed with that. Of course, there's more to being a player that can be trusted than just beating players or having the ability to beat players. There's more to your game, or there needs to be more to your game than that. So, look, he did well on Saturday when he came on. He affected the game positively. That's all you can expect to do when you make a substitution. But absolutely, I say he seems to now get himself on the bench. Can he keep it every time he gets game time? Can he show the manager what he's about and keep pushing for a starting shirt? Say, I think what Martin has created, and we mentioned it on the radio on Saturday before the game. I think there's real good competition for places. And we were talking a week ago when we know Matt Palmer at Cheltenham, brilliant performance. And we said, look, as good as the skipper is, we all know that, but no need to rush him back. And he didn't. He kept the same team. Now, you look at the first half performance and go, okay, a bit lackluster, wasn't great. He makes the change at half time, doesn't he? Matt Palmer on the bench, great player to have on the bench, comes along, helps us tick a little bit better, get on the front foot. Will Jarvis came on, had a positive impact, and Matt Dennis off the bench took the penalty away. That's exactly what you need a squad for, and that's exactly why you need competition for places, is that everybody has got a chance if they perform. And if you perform when you're starting, you'll keep your shirt. And if you come on and perform, then no doubt you'll be pushing to get a starting shirt. So there's always pressure on everybody to perform. And that way you'll just keep things fresh and keep players going. And hopefully that gives a positive impact and keeps the results positive for the club. Yeah.
Stephen Newton said, I said Dennis straight away would take the penalty. Rudy Holzman, he's in Brussels. Yeah, I've met Rudy a couple of times. Thoughts about Friday? I think he means Saturday. Team can't break down low blocks without a conductor like Palmer. Hope he stays fit. Donny Pie. Jarvis has made more appearances this season than Chloe, who has disappeared altogether off the show. She's around, don't worry. She's got full-time job now, Chloe. See, I'm like long gone part-time. Stell's got his own little business, so like we're all right for time, but Chloe's working like a one-arm paper hanger these days, so it's hard to get her onto the show. She's probably still working now. Colin Metcalf, what's the situation with Bedo's yellow cards and when do they get reset? Yeah, I love to have quite a few Notts fans on social media were actually telling Martin Patterson he'd got it wrong. I love that. Like the manager, he's not going to have studied these yellow cards because the talk was it was 5, wasn't it, and a ban. And Martin's got it wrong. We can't play him. We'll lose the points if we play him. He needs to change it. Oh dear. People on social media, they're never wrong. Wool Jam. Evening. Jarvis and Bennett both take defenders on, and it's exactly what we need more of. Jody has been a little reluctant to do this of late. Ian Cooksey, to be fair, I think Kuyar offers more than Jarvis or Bennett and seems to want to work a little bit more. AD Clark, I'd like to see Jarvis in a number 10 with Hall both feeding Jatta. Okay, plenty more coming in. Still, we look from top Walsall to 13th. That might be Fleetwood, can't remember, top of my head.
Yep.
7 points. Top 13. What does that say about the league?
It says it's potentially going to be a blanket finish, isn't it? I think it says that sort of similar to last season. I think it's there is no real standout team. It's very much League Two, as League Two has been for a lot of throughout history, in that anybody can beat anybody on the day because of the inconsistencies of players and teams at this level. There's nobody who really stands out. You look at MK Dons in terms of their budget and players that they've signed at the start of the season, and you expect them to come good. And sure enough, the form table has them. They're the form team away from home. But at home, maybe teams are employing low blocks. Maybe teams are going there with that view that they're the team to not lose to, and they're finding it difficult at home. But either way, it's so tight that the fact that everybody has lost at least 3 games,
Yeah.
and the majority, apart from Bromley and Chesterfield, everyone's lost 4,
Yeah.
shows that there are inconsistencies and very little to choose between the teams. And it can be any given Saturday, Tuesday night, whenever the games are played. As we've seen, performance level at Cheltenham didn't marry up with the performance level Saturday, for Notts. So the performance levels can be up and down. The teams that are the most consistent over 46 games will ultimately, as ever, sort of end up in them top places. But at the minute, 7 points separating 13 teams. Like, you don't need to be a genius to tell you what that says. It says that a lot of the teams at this level are very similar in terms of ability. And like I say, we're talking about finances and budgets and salaries and things like that. It goes to show that, as we saw last season, as we've seen throughout football, having a big salary or wage bill doesn't necessarily guarantee you're right at the top. You've got to use it well. You've got to manage them egos when players are there on big money. You've got to manage squads. So, it is difficult. The lower down the leagues you go, obviously at the top end, you have all the money, you're buying quality that is proven, isn't it? And generally, it helps. But lower down, it is difficult. And this season, we've played Swindon, haven't we? We've not played Walsall. We've got them in December. We've played 3 of the top 4, I think. Is that right? Swindon, Bromley, Gillingham, 3 of the top 7. Sorry,
Yeah.
and there's nobody that you'd say they're a standout. Out of the 16 teams we've played, there's nobody really that you'd say they are an absolute team to watch. They will be strong. Time will tell. It's whoever can get that consistency, get a little bit of luck, maybe signings in January, who knows? But again, consistency is the watchword in League Two. I don't think there's a team that is going to blow everybody away. Not from what I've seen so far, anyway.
Yeah, and you mentioned there about budgets, and just developing some of the points that we spoke about at the start of the program. Wimbledon owned by a trust, one of the very small number of clubs that are owned by a trust. Very difficult to be able to have sufficient funds to withstand 4 games being postponed, going out the cups in the first round, all of that sort of thing. And if you look at the figures, 14th highest budget. Got promoted last year. Well done. Use the money wisely. 23rd out of 24 when it comes to budget. The sums of money that League One clubs are losing, and I think this was kind of part of the point that Joe Palmer raised. I'm not sure it came out the way he wanted it to, but he was kind of saying Notts will get a lot closer to breaking even in League Two than they will in League One. And if you're talking about a salary cap of 4.7 million, you can kind of see the sums of money that are required, because clearly at the minute there are clubs over 4.7 million. There's a stat from Wimbledon. I find this hard to believe, but they say that clubs in League One average lose 5 million a year, and that in League Two overall, total number of losses, divide it by 24, it's 2.2 million pounds. Notts would be about on that 2.2 million, and that's with average crowds of 10,000, by the way, as well. One of the things that always gets pointed towards, Stel, is player wages. Yeah. And clubs as a whole are trying to look at ways to collectively drive player salaries down. Salary cap is the obvious one, because ultimately clubs and club chairmen can never be left to their own devices. They'll all say, "Oh, we're definitely not going to spend a bit more money." There'll be two or three other chairmen that then spend double. So you can't leave clubs to their own devices. It'll always go up. PFA's position, and I would totally understand this. You can't have salary caps, restraint of trade, etc. But it's an inescapable fact that outside of the Premier League, 72 clubs, there's about 69 of them lose money, and big money. Big money, if those figures from Wimbledon are right, average of 2 million a year in League Two, 5 million in League One. Goodness only knows what it is in the Championship, because that is a real basket case with clubs coming down parachute payments. As a former player, do you think this is down to the players, or ultimately it's down to the clubs for paying the wages?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't be hypocritical and sit here now as an ex-player who obviously got paid well, compared to average people in normal jobs outside of football. So I can't sit here now and go, yeah, the players are at fault for taking the wages. Somebody offers to pay you money. And whether it's football or any walk of life, there are very few people, I think, you know, on the planet. Some will, but very few people who will turn down extra money for doing a job. You know, if it's your job, your profession, whatever it is, if somebody offers you a pay rise, very rarely do I imagine people go in and go, no, 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 I'm not worth that. Don't worry about it. Leave it. It'll be fine. Give it somebody else. It might happen occasionally, but it doesn't happen very often. So every footballer contract has been agreed, okayed, negotiated, but accepted by the employer, which is the football club, the business of the football club. Just like anybody who works in the offices, just like anything else, there are salaries that are agreed and okayed and budgeted for. Now, the problem for me comes, and like I say, this salary cap conversation has been around for years, decades. It's been becomes a bit more vociferous at times, and then goes away again, and then comes back. But I don't know how they employ it, because again, the PFA, I think, have already said they're going to come out and oppose it as a blockage on trade or lack of freedom of trade and things like that. So until the rules and regulations change, I think it's sort of a little bit of a moot conversation. Although I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, but I think it's got to be aligned with getting football's finances of clubs house in order, and how you do that, not easy. But as you say, there's 98% of clubs are making losses, almost unsustainable losses, really, if the people who are footing the bill, i.e. the Reach brothers at Notts at the minute, if they decide A, they don't want to foot that bill, or B, they haven't got the funds to foot that bill.
Exactly.
So, again, and things will get mooted, like could every club or every club's owner or owners be asked to put a bond with the
I,
Football League, and the thing of what, a year, 2 years worth of money, certain amount of millions of pounds, whatever it is, that is maybe more effective than doing the so-called fit and proper test for owners, which, as we've seen, isn't really worth the piece of paper that it's written on. So it's a very difficult legislative sort of problem that needs solving, and how they go about it, you've got to have sort of legal framework for it as well. You've got to get the laws changed and regulation changed. Government need to be involved as well. Be interesting to see with this independent arbiter, if you like, the
yeah,
independent people coming into football, see whether that sort of is the first step along the way. But look, for years, for decades, people have been saying that football clubs are unsustainable. Football is unsustainable. It will implode at some point. And as we've seen, some clubs have, and they've gone by the wayside. The clubs that now you see some Phoenix clubs come back, and you don't want to see that happen. There's too much tradition in English football, British football, for that to become a regular thing. But because of the amounts of money that are at stake, it's very, very difficult to temper because some people will equally argue, as much as there should be caps on what you can spend, some people will equally argue that, hey, if we've got loads of money, the Man Cities of the world, the owners of them, that they should be free to spend it how they please. So again, how you get a solution that fits everybody, it's as difficult as trying to pick pre-match music, I reckon, that keeps everyone happy.
Yeah, one of my pet subjects, because we hear a lot about the brothers' approach of making knots sustainable, and I always think that's not really an accurate use of the phrase. I think that under the Alex and Christopher, knots are at their most stable for since Derek Pavis left the club. And my definition of stable is that knots are not next week, next month, next year suddenly going to have a terrible cash crisis or have to sell 8 players, or whatever it is, because the brothers have funds, um, and they have funds that they can make available to the club both on the pitch and off the pitch. So, for instance, buying that warehouse Nest, and that's costing the best part of £1 million, and they're in a position to be able to do that because they have the funds and see a longer term view to develop revenue and incremental streams at Knots. So stable. But when Knots go, oh well, we're going to be sustainable under the brothers. My definition of sustainable is we break even, we don't lose money. And cynic in me, I do not see the brothers getting this club to a point where we break even year after year. I just don't see it. I think it's just virtually impossible to do it in the way that football is currently structured, with wages that are paid, overheads, and all the rest of it. And ultimately, when we talk about not being sustainable, 20 million quid for the brothers, give or take a few million, and they've had to write off a large proportion of that 20 million already. They've only been here 7 years. And you made the point there. If at any point we give them too much jip, or their own family circumstances change where they don't have the money, that's what happened ultimately with Alan Hardy. And in the case of Ray True, he'd had enough. So he didn't want to put money in. You're then in a difficult position. And Knots owing the brothers, even after they've written off debt, they're still about £7-8 million in debt. So clearly they'd want that back. So you're already talking £7-8 million to buy Knots straight away in League Two, which is debatable whether it's worth that much. So I like you. I cannot see salary caps getting in because of the laws of the land. And the PFA position. So I'm not quite sure, if I'm honest with you, Stalin, and you work in finance, the whole football it's not just football, is it? I read somewhere Premiership rugby, got themselves into all sorts of problems, and apparently every single club in Premiership rugby, the top rugby division, and they've more or less made it impossible to get promoted and relegated. It's really difficult. Every one of those clubs loses millions of pounds every year, and that includes historically profitable clubs like Leicester and those sorts of things. So a lot of professional sport just loses money, and I'm not quite sure how you ever address it, because the view is there's a self-made man that supported Notts County, or a self-made man that supported Mansfield, aka John Radford, who comes in at age 45 or 50 and then spends a shed load of his wealth for a while. And that seems to be the business model.
Yeah, that seems to be the business model everywhere. But it is, and we've got in danger of going off topic, sort of thing. But a lot of the world works in debt, doesn't it? The country is in debt. Everybody who buys a house, not everybody, most people who buy a house with a mortgage are in debt, aren't they? But what's sustainable, I think, in terms of football and in terms of what Joe Palmer and the Reach brothers are trying to go, is a sustainable level of debt. losses that are sustainable, can be afforded, can be managed. There can be money coming in that, like you say, sustainability in terms of the income and the expenditure balancing out at zero or maybe in the positives. I think when we had Kieran Maguire on, did he say
Yeah,
there are 2 or 3 clubs out the 92 that are in that sort of
yeah,
field? So I think sustainable is a sustainable level of debt that would be sustainable not just by the Reach brothers, but if in any point in the future any possible owner that can manage that sort of debt, there's a level of debt that is sort of acceptable almost in the world. It's just how a lot of business works on. And again, don't forget that a lot of football owners don't just own a football club, they own other business as well. And in the world of business finance, you can offset losses on one business
yeah,
against
yeah,
profits from other businesses. So
yeah.
there's a little bit of accountancy sort of jiggery pokery that can be done, and legally,
Of
obviously,
course, yeah.
I'm not suggesting otherwise. um but like I say, it's like I say, profitable football clubs are, they are few and far between. And the fact, but again, it's always that chance of winning the golden ticket, isn't it? Back to back promotions. But because of you get promoted, as Wimbledon have maybe put out, you say, well, if they had the 14th biggest budget in League Two and
Yeah,
got promoted, overachieved, got promoted.
yeah,
And again, I'm not saying they have or they haven't, but this is what they've put out. You go, well, even if you and then they're their 23rd biggest budget in League One,
yeah.
you go, well, a salary cap isn't going to affect them, is it? Because they're nowhere near the salary cap. A salary cap's not going to save them. If they're losing money, they're losing money
Good point.
because the
Good
full
point.
business as a package, not just the salary of the players, is causing them to be financially unstable. The whole setup, the whole viability of everything, because you go, well, have they pushed beyond their means if they are 23rd out of 24 teams in the division? You go, well, that's unsustainable, isn't it? So I don't think a salary cap is going to be the answer for Wimbledon. Maybe it is. Maybe they've got an unusual set of circumstances. But
Good
don't
point.
forget, as we were
Yeah,
speaking about before we came on air, there are things like bonds and borrowing and debt to be
yeah,
repaid, debt repayments already for things, where their ground is. They might rent it, they might have high rental payments, things like that. So there are things that fall outside of your salary cap
yeah,
playing budget that a salary cap isn't going to affect one little bit, I wouldn't have said. And again, I've not looked into the Wimbledon things, but from what you've said, just looking at the headline bits that you've mentioned, a salary cap isn't going to solve Wimbledon's problems. They, like they've said, they need outside investment. So they basically need somebody to come in who can fund the losses.
yeah.
And
with
and,
with
and
no
that
say in the club.
essentially,
With no
yeah,
say in the club.
well, yeah. But that essentially is what all football club owners are doing, funding losses, apart from the 2 or 3 teams that supposedly are making breaking even or making money. But that's what a football club owner almost agrees to do,
Yeah,
for various reasons. And you'd have to speak to football club owners to their motives and real reasons for doing it. Like I've always said, I think there's aside from the Reach brothers, which I think that, like I say, you can't say a bad word about them really. I think they've been brilliant for Notts, as you say, put us on a real stable footing. Um, I think aside from them, every other football club owner I've known has done it because there's a bit of ego involved. So, and I don't doubt there might even be with them a little bit of it somewhere along the line. And it might just be to prove that the data model and Football Radar can do what they think it can do. But I'm not using that as a derogatory thing at all. But I'm saying, in usual, I think football ownership, because it's successful businessmen, isn't it? Generally, they've made their money doing whatever their business or businesses are, and then ego takes over, and it goes, oh, I quite like fancying going in directors' boxes up and down the country of football league clubs and maybe even the Premier League and big clubs, and I fancy going and getting 40,000 people thinking I'm a hero if I can do well for the club. And as we know, it can go the other way. And so at the minute, not far from me, but Chef Wednesday are the club, aren't they, that are in trouble, and they're going through the mill, but they're only the latest. Hopefully, they'll come out the other side, and they'll be stronger and better for it. I've spoken to a few people up here who say we'll possibly be playing them next year. I hope they're right.
Yes, and I do think the point, and I've mentioned this before, you mentioned about a bond being a far, far more effective tool than a fit and proper persons test, because money, money talks, doesn't it? And the number of
Yeah.
transactions. When you have to look back to Munto, Munto bought this club for £1. Everything that Russell King did was £1, and he got hold of Notts, did all his stuff. Same with the way he handled his other businesses and all the rest of it. Just £1. Whereas if like you say, if the bond is 500,000 or whatever it is, right, he would never have bought Notts County. I guarantee you that deal would not have gone through if they'd had to lodge £500,000 with the Football League. And if people turn around and say, "Oh, well, we can't afford £500,000 as a bond," you shouldn't be running a football club, because we're looking at figures here that Wimbledon are putting out. Average loss in League Two was £2,000,000. So 500 grand up front, right, is 3 months. 3 months operating costs. So, whether that happens, I don't know. But you and I know that there are all sorts of nefarious characters right now running clubs. We know who they are, and we know who are going to have problems and challenges. Morecambe was a case in point that I knew last year they would have all sorts of problems just because of the previous reputation or the handling of the owners. Now then, I don't give yellow. It's a long time since I've given a yellow. Don't like to give a yellow card, but Greza Maxwell, it's a yellow, and you're lucky it's not a red. Gratuitous, inaccurate descriptions of players' salaries, former players. And players that left us last summer. Those figures, let me just be quite clear to someone that might believe you for a minute, Greza, complete and utter rubbish. Okay, you get a yellow for that, for spreading unsubstantiated gossip, and you're lucky it's not a red. Okay, that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to read the comments out. Adam Kent would like to look at Wrexham's books for the last 3 seasons. It's the old stable versus sustainability, Adam, isn't it? They're stable because they've got a Hollywood A-lister and a load of other very wealthy Americans buying into the club. Whether it's sustainable, well, if he's prepared to bankroll those sums of money over a long period of time, I suppose I don't call it sustainable, but some people would. Some people would. Robert Minister from Down Under, great show, lads. Very interesting discussion regarding finance. Ian Cooksey, the way Wrexham are marketed is over and above anything else in the Football League. You can bet that non-footballing finance would dwarf any finance made within football. Okay, interesting debate. We better bring it back. Before we finish, because someone said we should have spoke a bit more about Harrogate last week. So Colchester, Stell, the Cowleys. I'm a big fan of theirs. What they did at Lincoln, perhaps not quite been able to emulate that. Moving on, are they going to be? Are they going to be quite cute? Do you think, Colchester, with when they come up here on Saturday?
Well, did you hear the story about they had to have taxis to the Walsall game, didn't they, at the weekend? The bus broke down, didn't it? Or had a couple of flat tyres. Yeah, they had a flat tyre, I think, on the Friday, and then another flat tyre again on the Saturday. So they ended up getting taxis. So the story's gone on. I've seen on a website today.
Okay.
They got taxis to the game and then beat the leaders in Walsall. So it obviously didn't play too bad of a part of it. But they'll be cute. They'll be switched on. They're a decent team. Obviously, we know the managers. We know generally how they go about things. They're organised. They won't leave any stone unturned, and they're on a good run of form again. Not the first team we've said that, lately, but they've won 4 out of the last 6. So they're decent. I think they've picked up more points away from home as well than they have at home. So it'll be a tough game, really tough game, as you always would expect against a Danny Cowley sort of team. So yeah, it's going to be a tough game, and Notts will want to respond after the Colchester, Harrogate game, after the performance in that first half, because yes, they managed to keep the unbeaten run going, but they'll be disappointed in that first half. They'll be disappointed they didn't get all 3 points, so they'll want to get back to winning ways. I think it'll be a really, really tough, combative sort of game. I expect it to be tight, physical. but hopefully we can come out with the 3 points. So, they've just got, is it Harry Anderson just got the player of the month for the division as well for them? So they're in form. They concede a few goals, but they score a few as well. So look, I'm not going to lie and change anything I said earlier on about this division. There's very little in it. It is about how you perform on the day. Very little between teams, sort of almost irrespective of where you are in the league table, because Colchester are only 7 points behind us at this point. So look, that can soon change. It's a big game. It'd be nice to put a bit of distance between. It'd be nice for us to push the teams above us and go and get 3 points.
We're several days out from the game. We've noticed that Martin rewards winning teams by not adopting a policy of rotation. Given it was a draw, given we played very poorly for the first half and then made changes in the second half, do you think it more likely Martin, assessing what happens in training, obviously this week, but do you think it more likely he would make changes this coming Saturday?
I think obviously depending on who's available and one or two knocks or whatever, but I don't think there'll be too many changes. I think the impact that the players had coming off the bench. Okay, Matty Dennis scored the penalty, but I don't know as if he's going to displace like Tyrese Hall, Connor Grant. I suppose he's the one at the minute that in that sort of attacking position, you go, well, maybe his place is slightly more susceptible at the minute, but that's not me saying he will change there. He's got the option of maybe looking to put Matty Dennis in from the start, maybe a Will Jarvis in that sort of position, but I don't think he's going to go and start Will Jarvis. He did well when he came on, won as the penalty, but I don't think that's quite enough to say, right, Keenan Bennett or Nick Cerulli, you're out, Will Jarvis is in. I don't imagine there'll be much change. I imagine Matt Palmer, as long as he's fit and felt no after effects, I think he'll start the game. He's got the option of pushing Tom Iopenda further forward in a starting position. So there's a few decisions, but I think the rest of the team will largely stay very much as it is.
Richard Terry, for the 23-24 season, 7 Premier League clubs, 4 Championship made a profit, and 1 team in League One. Grezza's he's showing a bit of dissent to me now. If you Google the salaries, they are there. Grezza, please.
They're never right on Google. Never right.
I promise you, players' salaries at Football League clubs are not posted on the internet and are accurate. They are made up by some statistical numpty, okay, eating a tray of baked beans made by his mum, right, under the floor on the stairs. Players' salaries are confidential, as you would expect them to be. They are not posted on the internet. I promise you. I promise you. I'm disappointed in you, Grezza. I'm disappointed. Any more and you're off. Any more and you're off. Right. Okay. About time to wrap up, Stal. It's been an interesting show tonight. Interesting. Have you caught the Munto? Because obviously you weren't around so much with Knots at that
No.
point. You caught the Munto show at all?
No, I've not. No. I did mention. I saw it. I was at my dad's yesterday and saw in the paper it was on. So yeah, I might try and catch it at some point. I've not seen it though, but it'd be interesting to see what they make of that sort of period, because like I say, we know how farcical it was, really, and up and down and unbelievable in terms of off the pitch.
Yeah, and look, again, ended on a poor note, no different to Alan Hardy. But the reality is that Ray True saved the club and enabled them to get promoted, because otherwise it was an automatic administration. But I thought it was interesting, some of the comments. And again, I think Hayden Green gets a terrible lack of recognition, because on the show they had John Armstrong Holmes, the Trust chairman. I think it's fair to say he polarizes opinion among the fan base. And at no point was there ever mention, it was all the Trust save Knots. Well, the Trust raised 250 grand. Aidan Green bunged in about 3.5 million and didn't get one mention. Didn't get one mention. So I am pleased that his legacy is continuing to be recognised by the club, with his name still on the family stand. Ian Cooksey wouldn't have missed the Munto season for the world. No such thing as bad publicity. Wool Jam, as it's perfect timing. As you wrap up, Paul, great to see Hayden Green's name back on the family stand. A true hero, and so say all of us. You're not on another holiday, are you? Pre-Christmas style? You're going to be here Saturday, or
I'm here Saturday. We are in a few days away. Yeah, next
oh!
week we are actually. Yeah, North Yorkshire. But yeah, no, we're here. I'm here now till I think the next game I miss is end of January, something like that. I miss one then. But yeah, no, I'm here now. So I'll be doing Saturday and then down at Bristol. So
Yeah.
yeah, looking forward to Saturday. Really looking forward to Saturday. I think it's going to be a real tough game, but the sort of game I think we can relish with this Martin Patterson team. The sort of game where maybe in years gone by you'd think a Danny Cowley's team might bully us a little bit. I don't think there's going to be any of that. I certainly hope not. Anyway, this weekend, looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I mean, we are a bit rationed, aren't we, for football over the next few weeks? Because being out the cup, that's a blank weekend. We don't seem to be having many midweeks. It does seem to be on quite a bit of rations now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but although this rain carries on how it did for Friday, then we might have a few games called off. You never know what Christmas has got in store, have you? But like I said, we've got some real good games coming up now. So you want to see Notts continue the form that they're in, if you like, keep this unbeaten run going, and carry it through up into the new year.
Ian Cooksey, good bit of humour. Just Googled Stell's wage on the Magpie Circle. How can you possibly afford him, Paul?
How many shillings and pence did it say? Just on that, and like I say, obviously I've been an ex-player, so I know, and I work in finance. I deal with it, so I know that the wages that get mentioned are absolute rubbish. You know, and you will hear people say them, or that you'll see reports of them, and they're absolutely verbatim. This is how much such. It's absolute rubbish. No, for a fact, it's not true. But I do remember back in the day, what one of the early whatever it was, Championship Manager games or whatever, had FIFA games. My lad was playing it. It had me on about treble the wages I was actually on in the game. I was on treble the money I was on in real life. I thought I need that agent that made the game. That was trying to get in touch with the manufacturers of the game to get me contract sorted. It's absolute. It is just think of a number when it goes out in the public domain. Generally, it is think of a number, and it's not even particularly close. But yeah, I don't know how much money it had me on, but yeah, pounds and shillings, that'd be it.
Very good. Thank you. Bit of a light-hearted end to the show. Thank you, one and all, for your messages and all your support. As always, thank you to JH Accountants and the Big Shed at the Trent Navigation for their support. Stel, thank you as always. You and Adam, will it be Saturday again?
Yeah, pleasure as always. But yeah, me and Adam on Saturday, and like I say, hopefully we can get a win going down to a bang out of form Bristol Rovers the following week. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Big game at the weekend.
No, and please pass on, my congratulations to Adam. I don't know whether you had a chance to hear it. I thought his interview, and fair play to the player and to the club, I thought his interview with Lewis McCarry was really, really, really good. Fair play to Lewis, fronting up the whole issue of the gambling, the charges, the FA, and goodness only knows what must have been going through his mind. You get knocked out by Wimbledon in the playoffs. 2 or 3 days later, you get a letter through the post saying you've been done by the FA for gambling from 4 years ago.
Yeah, incredible. And yeah, absolutely. I will do, Paul. And I did listen to that before the game. He told me he was doing Lewis and speaking to him. And I think credit to Lewis McCarry, comes across brilliantly. Doesn't duck any questions, doesn't hide any fact. And I think Adam as well, he obviously always does his research and does his homework. And he'd read, I think it's a 17-page document that you can read from the hearing of what he said. And the big thing that came across was like the remorse that Lewis McCarry showed and all that sort of thing in the report. And then, like I say, he was open and honest. And for a youngish lad, that can be a daunting time. And credit to him to come out of it. And even more credit to him when you put in perspective the performances he's put in for Notts since he's got back in the team, because that could potentially derail your career. Really could. Say not put an end to your career, but it really could put it on the skids. And credit to him, credit to the club as well. Everybody sort of comes out of it with credit, for mistakes made. But I think, given that interview, it's worth listening to, and also I mean, not that I've read it myself, but apparently the findings are worth reading if you can read 17 pages of it. But but it is interesting, and it goes to show, doesn't it, that the sort of human side of people who are footballers. Footballers are still people. We talk about them, as just this special creature of a footballer, but they are people underneath it all, and they make mistakes, and they have to learn, and they have to be punished, and so be it. But they like I say, they're no different to everybody else.
Yeah, and I think great resilience from Lewis, because I'd heard a little whisper at the start of the season that one or two players were perhaps advised they might start wanting to look it for another club, might not be part of the future, and I'd heard the names of three players. One of them was Curtis Edwards, who ended up going to Gateshead. Another was Hinch, who's ended up going on loan to, is it Altrincham? And that third player, who there was talk of him being surplus to requirements, was Lewis Macari. And he hardly got a look in. Remember going on the tour to Germany, hardly got a minute, wasn't involved at the start. He's still got that gambling charge hanging over him. He's got his head down, and he's now got himself regular minutes and a starting place. So I think, like you just said, could have gone one or two ways, and he's done really well to come out the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. Credit to his attitude, mental fortitude that he might not really realise, until he's older. But that's got to be like I say, I think it was 2-3 days after that, getting beat in the playoff semi-final. He had word that it was an FA investigation or Football League investigation into him, and he's had that hanging over him for best part of 3 months, isn't it? 4 months maybe, or maybe even more, isn't it? Till he's found out the actual consequences. So, a lot of pressure at a fairly young age, and he's dealt with it, come back, responded brilliantly well. So all credit to him.
Okay, that brings us to an end. That's a wrap for this evening. I'll be back on Friday evening. Stell will be on BBC Radio Nottingham duty with Adam Hassel on Saturday. Look forward to seeing you all down there, 3 o'clock against Colchester. And I think I'm right in saying I saw something come out from the club just before I went on air. Grimsby tickets for season ticket holders with 10 or more. That'll probably get postponed anyway. I think go on sale tomorrow if you're watching this on Monday evening, on Tuesday morning. Thanks again, everyone. Thank you, Stell, as always.
Pleasure. No problem. Have a good week, everybody.
Have a good week. See you soon. Cheers for now. Bye-bye.
Cheers.